Antidepressants pose many well-known risks and harms. However, there is one in particular that doctors or patients never talk about. So in this video, I'd like to show you which one that is and what to do about it. So let's get right into it. Hi, my name is Ivan, and I've been a facilitator of ceremony for over 10 years. This means that I helped hundreds and hundreds of people get off of their antidepressants. I also used to teach chemistry for a living, so I'm very familiarized with how these antidepressants work and interact with our brains and our neuroreceptors. So I think that would be a good place to start this topic, and later on I'd like to let you know about this number one harm that I believe antidepressants do or have on people that is never really talked about. Okay, so let's start with the most common type of antidepressant, which is called SSRI, which stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. I know those are a lot of words, so let's start by removing selective and just think of serotonin reuptake or reabsorption inhibitor. That is a little bit easier to understand, and to make it even shorter, this means that serotonin cannot be reabsorbed. Right? There's an inhibition of the reabsorption or the reuptake of serotonin. So what does this mean? Well, we first need to talk about how the experience of feeling happy or well-being works when it comes to the brain. I like my explanations to be very relatable. So I know there's a lot of you viewers who don't have specifically a scientific mind or an education in science. So I will reduce my explanation to very simple terms, and very complex processes that happen in our brain, I'm going to also try to reduce them to a very simple explanation. So the way it works is we have the end of a neuron here, which is called the axon or axon terminal. And then we have the beginning of a new neuron here, which is called a dendrite. And then there is this space that it is between both neurons. This space is called the either intraneuronal space or the synapse. Okay, so we have a neuron, it ends in its axon. We have this space called intraneuronal space or synapse. And then we have the beginning of the new neuron. When this neuron wants to communicate with this one, this neuron sends a chemical signal. This signal, which is chemical, means that there is a chemical going in this space. And then once it reaches the new neuron, the dendrites contain something called receptors, which means they receive this chemical that's been floating around, and the chemical will give them a message, which then this neuron will receive through its receptor, and then it will transform it into an electrical signal. Once the message is delivered, this chemical that was in this receptor goes back into the neuron who released it. Okay? So this chemical that's been floating around and then coming back, in this specific case that we're talking about antidepressants, is a neurotransmitter called serotonin, which you might be familiarized with. Now, what antidepressants do is the reuptake, which means that the serotonin is going back and then it gets reuptaken or reabsorbed by the neuron who released it, is blocked, which is why it's called a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It inhibits or it blocks the reabsorption of the serotonin. Now, serotonin is sent, it is received by the new neuron, and when it wants to come back, it's blocked. It cannot be reabsorbed. Now, why is this happening? Why does this make us less depressed? Well, this specific part is not specifically understood, but what it is understood is that if in this space called synapse between the two neurons, if in that space there is serotonin floating around, then we experience that sense of well-being, right? So when it is blocking the reuptake of this serotonin, the serotonin is forced to stay in this space also forcing this feeling of well-being within ourselves. And that is simply how these common SSRIs, the most common type of antidepressants, work. It is by blocking the reuptake of serotonin so that serotonin can be floating around, and we experience a bigger sense of well-being and happiness. So you might wonder, then what's the issue with that? And I'm glad you asked, because the answer is actually very simple, and it is basically in the combination of these two concepts. One, homeostasis. Homeostasis, it is the tendency of two independent parts to go back into equilibrium. And our bodies are always seeking for homeostasis. So it is always seeking to go back into balance and to go back into equilibrium. So if there is a lot of serotonin floating around, the way for the body, one of the ways that the body's natural mechanisms find to go back into balance is by reducing the amount and the density of the neuroreceptors available. So if I have so much serotonin floating around, the only way that the body finds is to say, okay, too much serotonin, then let's reduce the amount of receptors to try to get back into balance, because our bodies are incredibly intelligent, and so the natural level of serotonin that we usually have, it is the one that keeps the body in balance. If we would have too much, then many of the processes of our bodies would get out of balance. Actually, if you have way too much serotonin floating around, what happens is something called serotonin syndrome, which can lead to death. So, too much serotonin, out of balance. Let's bring it back into balance by reducing the amount of receptors available. So that is the first reason, which is homeostasis. The second is atrophy. So imagine that you break your arm or a leg, and then you put a cast on it, and then you don't use it for a whole month, right? While your bones are healing. What happens is that when you get your cast out, this arm sometimes is half the size than this arm. Why is that? Well, the body says, I am not using this part. So there is no need to invest energy and resources in keeping it up. Because I am not using it, I'm going to bring my resources somewhere else, and the consequence of that is atrophy. The same thing happens with our brains and our receptors. So if we are inhibiting the reuptake of it, and we are going back into homeostasis, so we're using less receptors, then they atrophy because we are not using them. So the main issue with long-term use of antidepressants is that the longer you use them, the less density of receptors for serotonin that you'll have. And so at the beginning, antidepressants are very effective because you have a lot of receptors, and then now there's more serotonin floating around. Eventually, when the body starts going back into balance or homeostasis, and the receptors start reducing in terms of their density, you might have a lot of serotonin floating around, but you don't have enough receptors to really welcome all of that serotonin and make use of it. So what happens is that eventually you get used to that state and they stop working as effectively, which is why they change you from one to the other if you do a long-term use of these antidepressants. So this has a major issue, which is the longer you stay on them, the harder it is to get off of them. Because now that you have less receptors, imagine if you also reduce the amount of serotonin. So you stop preventing the reuptake of it, or better said, by stopping the antidepressants, you allow again the reuptake. So this serotonin that was floating around goes back in there, but now you have much less receptors to receive whatever was left. So people who have been using antidepressants for a very long time, they get in such chemical imbalance where the neuroreceptors are not as dense as they used to. And so once you stop the antidepressant, you fall into a much larger or deeper or harder depression. This is why stopping antidepressants can lead to suicidal thoughts, because now your depression is even deeper than the one that you used to have before starting the antidepressants. If you saw my video on drug versus medicine, We talked about drugs being substances that are addictive, that are bad for you, that are hard to get off of them, that make you enjoy first, whatever effect that is, and pay for it later. And also that they make you, in a way, escape your problems. So if you think about antidepressants, it seems like antidepressants definitely fit all of those boxes. They are hard to get off of. You might get suicidal. They make you escape your problems because you're not really addressing the point of why you are depressed to start with. And this is something that we're about to talk about a little bit more in depth. They are bad for you. Well, I'm talking already, right, about the scientific proofs and studies that have been done into what they do to your brain and your neuroreceptors. And they help you escape your problems. This is the same thing. It means to not address the issue of why you are depressed to start with. I'm just depressed. I don't care about why. I'm just gonna take this pill and pretty much escape the reason for why I was depressed to start with. And that is the next part which I would like to address, which is that antidepressants don't really heal you. They are not a medicine in that specific way that you take it and then your problem is gone. If we're going to talk about depression as a problem, taking antidepressants will not make your depression go away. What it will do is it will give you a false sense of well-being, or the sense of well-being will be real, but it's not long-lasting. It's not something that it is fixed. It's not something that you took and now you feel well and then you can discontinue it and continue feeling well. That is what I call a medicine. This falls more under the category of drug and being dependent on it, where you will only be happy as long as the serotonin is floating in this space between two neurons, and if you discontinue, you will fall back into your depression. That is because the source of the depression is not chemical, which is the way it is being thought by in the West. The Western approach to depression is you have a chemical imbalance. You have been born with a chemical imbalance. Something is wrong with you intrinsically. The way you are is wrong. The way you are is sick. Your brain is not a normal brain to start with. Therefore, the solution is to fix your chemical imbalance, is to fix the problem that came with you when you were born with your brain. Now, there's something off, right, about that kind of approach. Something must be wrong about that. It just doesn't feel right. And I actually know that that is not right because I helped thousands of people get off of their antidepressants and off of their depression. So what I found is not that your depression is stemming from your chemical imbalance, but that your chemical imbalance, which is real, is stemming from your depression. Your depression comes first. Your depression is the cause. And as a consequence, there is a chemical imbalance. So if we focus on bringing the chemical imbalance back into balance by preventing the reuptake of serotonin, which is not really in balance, then your depression will be fixed. That is false. That is not the case. What we need to do is fix the depression, and then the chemical imbalance will be fixed. And this is something that I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. I am not coming up with this. I just see it over and over again in my work. Okay, so how do you fix the depression? Well, we need to understand what caused the depression to start with. And the causes can be plenty. You might not be following your path or what you are passionate about. And that can be a depressing thing to do. You might have unresolved childhood trauma. Maybe something happened to you that you are or you might not be aware of, that it is all trapped somewhere in there, giving you this sense of sadness or just that life isn't nice or that the world is not meant to be trusted. There are plenty of reasons. There's probably hundreds or maybe thousands of reasons of why somebody can be depressed. It could be a life situation that you're living in this moment, but you usually are not feeling that way. It can be that you were not the popular kid in school, and that's why you grew up with a lack of self-confidence, and not feeling confident make you feel depressed. Honestly, there's thousands of reasons why you could be depressed, and it is very unique for each person. What is not unique for each person is that depression is caused by a psychological issue and not by a chemical issue. Yes, it is true that there are exceptions to pretty much every rule. But generally speaking, those are the vast minority of the cases. For the vast majority of the cases, depression starts first rooted in a psychological issue that makes you feel depressed, which is represented in the brain as a chemical imbalance. So rather than trying to fix the symptom or the consequence, let's fix the cause that it is creating that chemical imbalance, and then the chemical imbalance will be resolved without the need to depend on a pill, without the need of all of the side effects. I didn't even mention many of them, which are sexual dysfunction, problem sleeping, gaining weight, and many others. Now, to get the point across about how we address depression in the West, let's take a look at this new breakthrough treatment that has been used lately to treat depression. It's called TMS therapy. And TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation, is a non-invasive technological breakthrough that involves applying a series of short magnetic pulses to stimulate nerve cells in the areas of the brain known to be associated with major depression. And if you keep reading this article, this is how they continue. Since depression is thought to be the result of an imbalance of these chemicals in the brain, TMS can restore that balance and thus relieve depression. I think the key word there is relieve depression. It will not heal it. It might relieve it for some period of time. Again, because as the article said, depression in the West is believed to be the consequence of a chemical imbalance in the brain. And this is why none of these therapies will ever address depression for good. They might help you relieve it momentarily. Okay, so am I saying all antidepressants should disappear? Am I saying there is no need for them at all? The answer is no. There is a space for them in our society. They have actually saved thousands and thousands of lives. So I am not saying that they are all wrong or demonizing them. However, at least in the United States, they are completely overprescribed. And this means that a lot of people who shouldn't really be taking them are taking them, or people who should have taken them for a short period of time continue to take them for sometimes decades and sometimes just for the rest of their lives. So if I am saying that there is space for them in our society, in a way I'm saying they should be prescribed, right? And the answer is yes, absolutely. But in which cases and how? What is the real use that we can give to antidepressants? And this use actually is being applied in a lot of countries, definitely where I come from, and a lot around South America and Europe, which is that they are used as a last resource or as a form of preventing something catastrophic. So for example, if somebody is suicidal and they just can't get out of that and their life is at risk, or if somebody has been laying on the couch for 3 months straight and they just can't get themselves out of it, then it is important, of course, to give them something that will get them out of that state, knowing that this is a temporary relief while they are searching to heal the real cause. And here is where the truth lies. Antidepressants should be prescribed only while you are seeking for the real solution. The problem of how they are prescribed in the United States is as a permanent fix, but they don't fix anything. So the only way to really keep your depression in check is by continue to take your antidepressants for the rest of your life. I've noticed that this happens mainly in the United States. Over and over again in my work, I find people who have been on them for 20, 30, sometimes 40 years, sometimes since they are 12. Imagine giving a 12-year-old an antidepressant because they are depressed. assuming that there's something wrong with them. Could it be that they are just 12? Could it be that they are just going through a lot of changes and getting into high school and having social anxiety and having all of these things and hormones are starting to rage, and that is part of being a human? It is amazing to me and awful that we are giving antidepressants to children because they can't adapt to the society that we have created, instead of giving them the space to feel what it feels like to grow up, to go through the roller coaster of all of those feelings. We don't tell them it's okay to feel all of that. We are telling them there's something wrong with you, and from now on, even though you're 12, until you are 95, you're going to take this pill because you were born wrong. And that is what keeps people in their depression. It's not just the pill, but it's a belief system that it is within us that there is something wrong with who we really are. And what I've seen over and over again is that when people change that belief system, which cannot be forced, there's of course a process to do that, they start believing that maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Maybe I'm just a human and I am supposed to feel sad and the next day joyful and the next day compassionate and the next day angry, and that all of these emotions are okay to feel because it is part of being a human. Once people have changed that belief system and addressed the reason of why they were depressed to start with, there is no need for antidepressants anymore. And I so wish that when we are prescribing antidepressants to people, that we would be telling them, hey, this is a temporary fix. The only reason why I'm giving you this right now is to buy you time, to get you off of that couch, to bring your suicidal thoughts to a rest, so that in that time, while you are feeling that relief, you can do whatever work is needed to resolve the issue, take it from the root, so that you never need to take this pill again. However, I never see that. Not in the United States, sometimes in other countries. But this should be the main way in which we approach the topic of depression and antidepressants. And that leads me to the number one harm that antidepressants are causing that no one is talking about. I pretty much just mentioned it. The number one issue, the number one problem, the number one risk that it is associated with antidepressants is not sexual dysfunction, is not problem sleeping, is not neuroreceptor density reducing, is none of those things, even though they are pretty bad. It is that they prevent you from addressing the cause of depression. And in a way, they are taking your power away. Because think about it. If you are in pain, you usually want to do something about it because we don't want to be in pain. If you're burning your hand, right, the first thing that you do is take your hand off the fire or off the hot metal. It's automatic. Your body wants to escape pain, wants to avoid it. So if you like, let's say that you now touch the metal, but you don't feel the heat, you don't feel the pain, you will have no real reason to get it out of there. So if it's actually dangerous, but you don't feel the pain, and you wait for a very long time, you will have no hand anymore. It will burn. And this is the same thing that we're doing with antidepressants. We don't feel our depression, which does not mean that we're not depressed. So we just leave it there. If we are not in pain, in this case, emotional pain, right? Depression is a form of pain, which is not physical, but is emotional. So if we are in emotional pain and we don't feel it, there's no real reason to get our hand off the fire. There's no real reason to address the source of the depression. And so by not feeling our depression, we can't really do something about it. And this is the number one issue and the number one risk that no one talks about when they give you antidepressants. They talk about all the secondary effects, maybe, sometimes. But they never talk about this, which to me is the most important thing. Now, why am I saying that they are taking your power away? Well, because if they would tell you, you have the capacity to heal, you have the power to hold all of these difficult emotions, you can do it, then you would feel, all right, I'm depressed, this is hard, but I can do it. I can go and find the source. I can empower myself to know that if I do the necessary work, I can get out of this challenge. They are, in a way, taking your power from addressing the natural challenges of life and of being a human being. Now imagine that you have that tool, you have the capacity to deal with life challenges, or you don't have it. I mean, which one would you prefer? Which one would you feel that makes you a much more wholesome and powerful human being? Which one would you choose? The first one is the one that takes away your power, is easier at first. It's less work at the beginning. It means that you can just pop a pill and forget about it. However, the depression is there and your capacity to hold difficult emotions gets reduced. But on the other example, in which you get your power back, you not only address your depression, but you're also comfortable holding difficult and heavy emotions. So you have this tool that will also assist you in the challenges in your journey for the rest of your life. It is almost like going to the gym. You can choose not to go, and that's easier at first, but then maybe it's hard to lift a chair. Or you can go to the gym, which is harder at first, but then it makes you stronger, and then you can use that strength throughout the rest of your life in all of the different situations. Now listen to this crazy statistic. In the United States, 65 million people are on some sort of psychiatric medication. That is 1 out of 4 adults, which is, to put it lightly, pretty insane. Another interesting thing that I already touched on is that I see many more people medicated for a very long time or forever in the United States in comparison to other places. Now, does that mean that in the United States there's more people that are depressed or people are in worse depressions? I don't think so. Honestly, where I come from in South America, there is a lot going on, and there's a lot of reasons to be depressed. And it is the same all over the world. Every single country and every single culture is dealing with their own hardships and challenges. And I have not noticed that people in the United States are more depressed than around the world. So if they are not more depressed, what is the deal with all of this over-medicating? And the answer is in that word, over-medicating. We're over-prescribing, we're over-medicating, we're taking people's power away. And I am not saying this out of a conspiracy theory. I am not a conspiracy theorist. I like my explanations and the way in which I educate people to be grounded, and to be grounded in actual facts that we can prove. So I am not saying there is some big brother out there over-medicating everybody. I think it slowly became part of our culture. The culture in the United States is a culture of get things quick, get them easy. And this is just part of how we became as a society. So maybe this is just one of the ways in which our obsession with comfort and our obsession with ease is showing up. And it is, let's also make things comfortable, quick, and easy, even when it comes to our depression. Honestly, I don't believe doctors and psychiatrists are the devil and they are doing this on purpose. What I believe is that all of the messages that I am conveying to you now have not been conveyed to them. They have not been educated in this specific way. So the point of this explanation is to slowly start changing that mindset into the one that it is the best and the healthiest for us. So what I would like for you to take out of this video is that there is nothing wrong with antidepressants per se. They have saved a lot of lives and there is a place for them in our society. However, they also have harmed and continue to harm lots of lives. Why? Well, here is the summary. 1. How overprescribed they are. 2. How long people stay on them without the intention of ever stopping. 3. How it makes people believe there is something wrong with them and continue to push away the reason of their depression, preventing them from ever finding it or from ever stopping their medication. 4. How much people underestimate them, taking them lightly like they are not a big deal at all, taking away their power and their own capacity to heal. 5th, We should start thinking of antidepressants as a short-term, temporary solution for a critical life situation, as a tool to help us find real healing in the meantime, with the intention of discontinuing them as soon as possible. And last and sixth, we don't want to use them as the fix itself that will make us ignore what's causing our depression and ultimately preventing us from healing. I want you to know that you do have the capacity to heal your depression and break free from your medications. You have the capacity to pull out any emotional issues from the root and do real healing work, whichever method you use. I've seen it thousands and thousands of times from people who have never in their life thought that they would ever be free from their medications. Anyone can do it, and I am sure that you are no exception. Know that there is nothing wrong with you. You have been traumatized. You might be living in a situation that it is worthy of your depression, but that doesn't mean anything about who you are as a person. You can do it. In some cases, we might need to experience to believe, but in this one, you might need to first believe in order to experience it. However much work it takes, I promise you it is worth it. I hope that this has helped to demystify some of the reasons of why we're depressed, and also encourage you to start working on fixing them for good. And as always, thank you for your attention and for your interest in healing. Before you leave, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. This channel just started, and in these initial stages, it helps out a lot. And I'll see you in next week's video. Click on the left square to watch another video I made on a related topic. All my content is free. If you appreciate it and wish to assist me to continue releasing this kind of content, please consider supporting me on Patreon. You can also follow me on my socials and subscribe to this channel.